Breaking news, or rather, heartbreaking news for Canon users, plus news about Nikon, Micro Four Thirds, and Fuji GFX. Right after the break, first I want to thank our sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace makes incredible websites with just a few clicks. You can set up a website for your photography business, for your video business, or any project, personal or professional, you have going on. Squarespace is your home on the web, separate from social media, something you own. Get your own custom domain where you can receive emails, take orders from clients, sell prints directly, or just about anything else you can imagine. Seriously, it's very easy to do. Go to squarespace.com/Tony. That's your first step to your whole new online life. Try it out completely free. And after you love it, yeah, you'll have to pay something. It's not like social media. Social media is making money off of you. You will be making money from this. After you love it, the coupon code Tony will get you 10% off. Thank you, Squarespace. Before we get to the big news, I want to share some really good news for Micro Four Thirds users who've had a tough time of it lately. In an interview with the French magazine Photo Trend, the director of imaging at Panasonic indicated that Micro Four Thirds users would probably have a camera with phase detect autofocus in their future. The GH5, GH6 lineup has really been held back by bad autofocus, so we're kind of hoping that this is going to fix the problem. I'll read you exactly what he said. We will consider adding phase detect AF to our cameras depending on the model characteristics, not only for full-frame cameras, but also for Micro Four Thirds. And on this last point, I invite you to stay tuned for our next announcements. We just reviewed the Panasonic S5, their first camera with real on-sensor phase detect autofocus, and it was an improvement. But I will caution you, it was still well behind the industry leaders Canon and Sony. Here's the thing, having phase detect autofocus does not solve all the problems. It's not an on-off switch. Like we've seen Canon and Sony both greatly improved their on-sensor phase detect systems over about the last decade that they've been working on it. And so it doesn't happen overnight. This is not going to be a cure-all, but it is a step in the right direction, and it is the first step of a long journey. And it is nice to see Panasonic acknowledging that they needed to change direction. That's good news for Micro Four Thirds. The bad news for Micro Four Thirds is, well, Sigma basically said Micro Four Thirds is dead, to them at least. Now, we've maintained for almost 5 years now that we believe Micro Four Thirds is heading downward to the point where gradually we'll see fewer and fewer releases and then basically no new substantial releases. And what we have seen in the last 5 years has tracked with that. The advancements that we've seen in the photography industry haven't been happening there first. They've been happening elsewhere. And most of the improvements that we've seen in Micro Four Thirds have been kind of minor, and they don't have a lot of new users coming into the system. All the new users seem to be going to Sony and Canon. Translated into English, here's roughly what the Sigma rep had to say. We are not planning to design new Micro Four Thirds optics at this time. Demand for this format is decreasing sharply. But then he went on to say a lot of things supporting the format. And he did clarify demand for Sigma lenses in the Micro Four Thirds format has decreased, so they're not motivated. But he didn't want to indicate that demand for other lenses wasn't doing well. But I will add, based on my own analytics, sales, traffic figures, I don't see a lot of demand for Micro Four Thirds anymore. And like I said, it is sort of tracking in the way that we predicted 5 years ago. Here's a puzzler from Nikon rumors. Nikon themselves officially showed this logo without really telling anybody what it meant. It's a bit of a puzzle. My first thought is that Nikon is going to be releasing a projector. This looks a lot like a projector, but what on earth is the circle with the arrow around it? Are they recycling old projectors? Here's my take on what this means. Nikon is going to start producing projectors, and this completes the circle, the life cycle of imaging, from capturing, which we all know Nikon does for both stills and video, to actually displaying it. You may think, who cares what brand your projector is? Any projector would work equally well, except Sony has been flexing on this for a long time, that you can capture your stills and video with Sony cameras. You could process it with Sony computers there, at least for a while, and then you could display it on your Sony TV or even your Sony cinema equipment. I have a Sony TV, so theoretically they could own the entire life cycle of my images, and maybe that's what Nikon is chasing. That's my theory. But in the comments, I'd like to hear what you think this logo means. Here is a rumor via mirrorlessrumors.com and SonyAlphaRumors.com about Fujifilm GFX. There was an interview that indicated a GFX sports camera could be on the way. And if you're familiar, GFX is a bigger sensor size than full frame, but so far they haven't really had very good even stills autofocus. So making a sports camera would be completely out of the question. And it really made me wonder, is this possible? And my first take is, no, this doesn't add up to me. First, sports photographers need fast primes. They're often working in low light conditions and they have to use fast shutter speeds. So courtside stuff, you use a 50 f1.2, you might use a 70 to 200 f2.8 for field sports, and then you have lots of big telephotos like a 300 f2.8, a 400 f2.8, and Fuji GFX has nothing equivalent to this. They don't have a single one of those appropriate lenses. So they'd be starting from scratch and having to design this whole new system, which would take them years. Also, medium format is inherently less good for stuff like this because the sensor is bigger. It takes longer to read out from. Thus, it's always going to be inferior. Also, even if you're relying on a mechanical shutter, the shutter, because it's bigger, takes longer to travel. So both the digital readout speed and the mechanical shutter speed are worse, making it harder to freeze the action and stop the flickering of artificial lights that are so common on indoor sports. Also, GFX autofocus has been bad up to this point. Even on the latest generation of cameras, when we tested them, we really struggled to use them to get precise autofocus for still subjects. Things like eye detect autofocus just isn't there yet, especially when you're looking at a 100 megapixel image with a super sharp lens. Like, you'll notice the slightest difference in focus, and I didn't find it reliable enough to recommend. But when subjects start moving, it becomes exponentially harder. And in my estimation, GFX is probably 4 or 5 years behind something like the Sony A1 or the Canon R5 or Canon R3 in the field of tracking moving subjects. So I wouldn't expect them to make a leap that big. Also, this is a really stubborn segment. Like, Sony's been making awesome sports cameras for maybe 6 years now, but still not many sports photographers use them because these people have been around for decades and they're highly invested in either mostly Canon equipment, some Nikon equipment. Sony has been making inroads into the professional sports shooter segment, but it is taking them a long time and it is very difficult. To start up a whole new system now in a declining segment would be absolutely insane. I don't think Fuji would do this, and I don't think they are doing this. I think these rumors are straight up wrong. I saw someone in the comments agreed with me. Here's what they said. They absolutely did not tease a sports GFX. The interviewer asked about it and they just agreed it could be a good product that doesn't currently exist. Go back and read the interview. Here's what happens. Somebody can skim an interview, or an interview can be poorly translated by Google Translate, and somebody will run an article on it. But that article will have a compelling headline, so it'll get lots of views, and then other blogs or YouTubers see that this is getting traffic. They don't really scrutinize it. They just run with the clickbait headline. And so that's not what we're doing. I am debunking this. I feel like GFX is going to stay focused on studio and landscape photography and will definitely not move into the sports segment. Okay, now you Canon people. It's good news and it's bad news, but I feel like it's really important because I know a lot of you have been holding off on buying a camera. So this might be what you need to go ahead and make a purchase for Canon equipment this year instead of waiting. Canon Rumors is saying there's not going to be a Canon R1 nor a Canon R5 Mark II in 2023. That these two new products are being pushed off until 2024. Now, we heard rumors about these throughout 2022, and we just got a new R6 Mark II. The original R6 was launched with the R5, so why was the R6 Mark II not launched with the R5 Mark II? I think the answer might be that Canon's taking a different approach with the R5 Mark II. That instead of replacing the hardware, they're going to update the software and try to get more life out of this. And in fact, I think this makes a lot of sense as camera manufacturers segue from being very hardware oriented to being more software and services oriented. Camera manufacturers have plateaued on what they can do with the hardware. There's only so many photons you can capture, so image quality probably isn't going to get significantly better until there's some other major leap. And that makes it hard for them to put together a compelling package to make users feel like they need to upgrade. So some camera manufacturers have been releasing new camera models that are essentially the same as the old camera model, but just with software updates. But why would you do that? Why not just issue a software update for the old camera? Well, they don't make any money off of software updates, but they are inevitably going to conclude that they could make money off of software updates. After all, Google, Apple, Microsoft, so many big companies make money off of software and software updates. So I do believe Canon, Nikon, Sony are figuring out right now how to start making money off of software and services, and we're going to start seeing monthly subscriptions and paid firmware updates for more and more of our cameras. For example, right now with your Canon camera, you can have it automatically upload files to the cloud, and from there it could go to Google or Adobe. And well, honestly, the last time I tested it, it didn't work well at all, but they will refine it. It'll take them a little bit, but you could certainly charge a subscription service for this and charge people different tiers based on how much storage that they're using. You could also lock out features until somebody paid for them. Niche features like Vlog or 4K at 60 frames per second or Animal IAF. Maybe you don't include those by default, but you charge $10, $50, $100, $1,000 for whatever these different software features are like. Look at the DJI Mavic 3 Pro versus Mavic 3 Cine. They have a massive price difference, and really the only differences there are all software based. You're paying for software licensing and the work that they put into it, and because they know they can just charge serious filmmakers more than they charge the average user. That is a profit opportunity, and frankly, the camera makers really need this. And they haven't really been on board with this whole software mindset. In fact, the entire country of Japan really lags behind other countries like Korea and the United States in their computer science education and the focus on building software as well as building businesses around software. So I do think culturally these camera manufacturers are fighting a bit of an uphill battle, but I do think they will get there. Okay, let's back up to the Canon R5 firmware update. Here's what Canon Rumors thinks we're going to be getting: lens breathing correction. When you focus from close to far or vice versa on a lens, Sony already does this in camera. This is actually one of those features that they might be charging for because it's not something that most people need, but it's something a few filmmakers would appreciate. The firmware update's also rumored to introduce the pre-shooting buffer, which, for example, the R7 and the R6 Mark II have, so it's a little weird that the higher-end R5 doesn't have it. It is mostly a software feature, so there's no reason they couldn't introduce it, though I hate the workflow on it. It's very difficult to actually get meaningful results out of it because they have to do the choosing of the pictures in camera or in one of their ridiculous apps. Anyway, they have a lot of work to do there, but I do think that they will put that feature into the updated R5 firmware. They will remove the 30-minute recording limit because, of course, they should. It was artificial and completely fake to begin with and just meant to push people higher up into their cinema cameras. They'll also add subject tracking for other types of vehicles, including bikes, trains, and planes, features that the lower-end cameras currently have and that the R5 definitely should have. And they'll extend the Animal IAF. So I think this is good news because while we're not getting a new camera, all existing R5 users will be able to take advantage of these new features, and essentially you will get a new camera. And honestly, there's probably not any big hardware breakthroughs. They don't need to release a new platform because their existing platform is powerful enough. And as for that R1 and R5 Mark II, Canon Rumors is saying we should expect them in the first half of 2024. That's a year out from now, at least. So that's why I would suggest if you've been waiting for these new cameras to come out, go ahead and purchase whatever you're going to purchase now. Like the R5 is still one of our favorite cameras ever. Something else I strongly recommend, getting a real website like squarespace.com/Tony. Start there. Build yourself a website. Get your own custom domain. Customize it to match your branding, your personal style. Show off your images, your video, or your business, or even your personal project in the best light possible. It works great. Desktop computers, tablets, smartphones, Squarespace. Make sure it works with everything and that it stays up and running 24/7 basically. They do the computer work so you can do the creative work. Squarespace.com/Tony gets you a free trial. When you love it, the coupon code Tony gets you 10% off. Thank you, Squarespace. Don't forget to subscribe. We have upcoming reviews of the Canon R8 and even reviews for some stuff I can't tell you about yet. Bye.